Welcome to Hashi Rest. Tonight's story is a quiet mystery, a place that appears complete, yet cannot be found on any map. There are no warnings here, no urgency, only a gentle question that unfolds slowly as you listen. Settle in, soften your breathing, and allow the night to guide you. The road had been steady for a long time, not remarkable, not difficult, just a ribbon of pavement stretching forward beneath a dim, even sky. The traveler had been driving long enough that the motion itself had become soothing. The low sound of the tires against the asphalt blended with the hum of the engine, creating a rhythm that required no attention. Miles passed without needing to be counted. There was no rush, no destination demanding urgency, only the quiet intention of continuing forward until stopping felt natural. It was late, but not deeply night. That in-between hour when the world feels suspended, when the towns settle into themselves, and roads begin to belong more to those passing through than those who live nearby. The signs along the highway had grown farther apart. The reflective surface caught the headlights briefly, then disappeared again into the dark. Names of places he did not plan to visit, distance that felt abstract rather than precise. At some point, without realizing exactly when, the road narrowed. It was not sudden. There was no sharp turn or warning, just a gentle easing away from the wide familiarity of the highway into something quieter. The traveler slowed instinctively. The pavement remained smooth, the lines still clear. Nothing about the road suggested it was less traveled, only that it was less announced. He followed it without deliberation. The car carried him through a stretch of trees that winked close but not threateningly. Their branches formed a loose canopy overhead, letting the headlights move across trunks and leaves in slow, drifting patterns. Time stretched. It was difficult to say how long he had been driving this time. Minutes felt indistinct from one another. There were no landmarks that demanded memory. Eventually, the trees opened. The road straightened again, and ahead, a cluster of light appeared. Not bright, not distant, just present. A town. It did not announce itself. There was no sign welcoming him, no name posted at the edge of the road, no indication that he had crossed any boundary at all. One moment there had been forest, the next buildings. The transition was so smooth that it barely registered as a change. He eased off the accelerator, letting the car move forward at a slower pace as the road became a main street. The town was quiet, but not empty. Streetlights cast warm, steady glow, evenly spaced without flicker. Storefronts lined the road, their windows dark but clean, as though recently intended to. A cafe with chairs neatly stacked inside. A small grocery store with shelves visible through the glass. Everything looked finished. Not abandoned, not closed down, simply complete. The traveler noticed that there were no cars parked haphazardly along the street. Vehicles were present, but aligned carefully, as if placed with the interior rather than convenience. He passed an intersection, then another. The town unfolded at a measured pace, revealing itself without hurry. There was a sense that nothing here had been left wholly. He searched for a sign with the town's name. Something official. Something that could anchor the place to memory. But there was nothing. Street names appeared on modest signs, simple and legible, though unfamiliar. They gave no hint of a larger identity. As he grew deeper into the town, a faint awareness settled in, not concern, but curiosity. He could not recall the moment that he had entered. There was no clear threshold in his memory, no point where he could say, "This is where the town began." It was as if the place had ground around the road rather than being approached from outside it. The car rolled to a stop at a red light. The signal changed almost immediately, as though it had anticipated his arrival. He continues on. A few people were visible on the sidewalks. They moved unhurriedly, alone on its pairs, their pace matching the calm of the evening. No one appeared surprised to see a car passing through. Their faces were relaxed, neutral, not unfriendly. It occurred to him then that he did not know what state he was in anymore. The realization was subtle, arriving without alarm. He had been driving for hours, crossing boundaries that mattered less and less the longer he stayed on the road. Still, there was a usual sense of orientation. Here, that sense was absent. He pulled over near a small park at the center of the town. The space was carefully maintained, grass trimmed, benches evenly spaced, a fountain at the center, its water moving slowly, soundlessly from the distance. He turned off the engine. The silence that followed was not heavy. It settled gently, like a blanket placed without weight. Stepping out of the car, he noticed the air. It felt consistent, neither cool nor warm, neither damp nor dry, just balanced. The town did not smell of anything specific, not exhaust, not food, not damp air or distant smoke, as though all necessary elements had already been accounted for. He walked a short distance, listening to his footsteps of the pavement. The sound felt contained, absorbed quickly by the space around him. A person passed nearby and offered a small nod. Nothing more. The traveler considered asking a question. Something simple, something ordinary. But for a moment, he only stood there, taking in the arrangement of the things. Windows reflected the streetlight softly. Curtains hung evenly behind glass. Porch light glowed with quiet consistency. Every house seemed occupied, yet no one gave signs of activity. He tried to recall the last sign he had passed before turning off the highway. The memory slipped away when he reached for it. Not erased, just unanchored. There was no discomfort in the forgetting, only the sense that the road behind him had already begun to lose definition. Eventually, he spoke to someone, a passerby whose presence felt as natural as the street itself. They exchanged brief words, polite and remarkable. The traveler asked casually where he was. The answer came without hesitation, but even as it was spoken, the name did not settle. It sounded correct in the moment, then drifted away like a word overheard in passing. He nodded, accepting it. There seemed no reason not to. As he continued walking, a quiet thought followed him, one that did not demand resolution. He could not remember when he had decided to come here. And yet, standing in the middle of the town, it felt as though he had arrived exactly when he was meant to. The traveler continued walking without choosing a direction. The town did not seem to require one. Streets branched gently from the main road, curving rather than cutting sharply, as though designed to slow anyone moving through them. Sidewalks were wide and even, their surface unbroken by cracks or weeds. Every edge appeared intentional, softened by time, but not worn down by neglect. It was immediately noticeable how clean everything was, not freshly cleaned, not polished in a way that felt artificial, but maintained. The kind of clearness that suggested regular care, performed without urgency. Leaves had gathered in corners, but only lightly. Paper bins stood empty or neatly folded. Nothing had been abandoned in haste. Houses lined the streets in calm repetition. Each one was slightly different, yet they shared a common restraint. Not bright colors, no bold statements, muted tones that blend easily with the light and the street lamps. Windows were intact, glass clear, frames recently painted or carefully preserved. Porch lights were on. Not all of them, but enough to give the impression of the readiness, as though the town expected movement at any moment, even if no one was currently taking place. The traveler slowed his pace, allowing his eyes to rest on small details. A bicycle leaned against a fence, its tires thin, chained lightly oiled. A delivery crate sat beside a door, sealed, uncollected but undisturbed. A bench bore the faint impression of recent use. The wood smooth where someone had sat. There were no signs of disorder, no broken windows, no closed-off streets, no faded notices warning of decay. It did not feel abandoned, and yet it did not feel busy. The absence of the traffic became more noticeable as he moved farther in. The roads were wide enough for a steady flow, the markings clear and bright, yet no car passed, no engines echoed, no doors slammed. The infrastructure existed in full, quietly waiting. The pedestrian signal changed from red to white without hesitation. The timing was precise, not rushed, not delayed, just correct. The traveler crossed and continued down a residential street, where houses stood closer together. Curtains hung behind many windows, some drawn, some open. In a few homes, lights were on the interior rooms, casting soft shades on the walls. But there was no movement behind the glass, no silhouettes passing, no televisions flickered, no gestures that hinted at conversation or routine. It was as if the town had paused between actions. The silence was consistent, not absolute. There were sounds, a faint hum from somewhere distant, the quiet clicking of a traffic light changing cycles, the subtle ruffle of air moving through trees planted evenly along the sidewalks. But nothing competed for attention. The traveler realized that his own presence did not disturb the space. His footsteps blended into the environment rather than interrupting it. The town absorbed sound easily, as though built with listening in mind. He passed a small storefront. The window displayed items arranged with care. Books stacked in measured heights. Objects placed with symmetry that felt practice rather than decorative. A handwriting sign indicated opening hours. The hours were current. The door was locked, but not closed for the night in obvious way. No sign suggesting absence, only patience. Farther along, a cafe occupied a corner. Chairs were pushed neatly beneath tables. A chalkboard menu listed simply offering in clean handwriting. Nothing extravagant, nothing outdated. It struck him then that everything here seemed ready for someone who had not yet arrived. The town had the quality of preparation, not anticipation. Exactly, but readiness. As though the final step had been completed, and now all that remained was for something to begin. He walked past a bus stop. The shelter was intact. Glass panels clean, bench smooth. A printed schedule was posted inside. Times were listed, routes indicated, destinations named. The paper was not yellowed, the ink had not faded, but there was no bus inside, and no one waiting. The traveler checked his watch without urgency. Time felt less relevant here, though it had not disappeared. It continued in the background, steady and unremarkable. This was led toward what appeared to be a small neighborhood square. Trees were planted at equal intervals. Their branches trimmed back thoughtfully. At the center, a low stone feature marked the space, a planter of mountain base. Its edges smooth, its surface unmarked by weather. The town did not show its age, nor did it pretend to be new. It existed in a state that resisted categorization, balanced between use and rest. He noticed then how consistent the architecture was. Different eras seemed to coexist without conflict. A building that suggested decades of history stood beside one that appeared more recent. Yet neither dominated the other. Everything had been adjusted quietly to fit the whole. There were no signs of expansion, no construction fences, no unfinished edges, no scaffolding left behind. Nothing here was in progress. That, more than anything, gave the town its strange completeness. Progress had already occurred. What remained was maintenance. He paused beside a window that reflected his image faintly. For a moment, the town appeared behind him in the glass, layered and still. The reflection made it feel distant, like a place remembered rather than occupied. As he moved on, he became aware of something else. There were no advertisements, no billboards, no poster competing for attention, no announcement demanding notice. Information existed, but only where it was necessary. Signs pointed, rather than persuaded. They informed without urging. The traveler felt his breathing slow, not intentionally. The town encouraged it. Each step seemed to carry the same weight. Each sound arrived and departed without echoing. Nothing pulled him forward faster than he wished to go. He passed a row of houses where mailboxes stood upright. Each one closed, flags lowered. None were overflowing. None were empty beyond expectation. The metal surfaces bore small marks of use, but nothing had been bent or forced. Someone lived here. That much was clear, yet the town did not reveal its inhabitants easily. He saw another person at a distance, walking with no visible destination. Their posture was relaxed, their pace unhurried. They do not look around as though searching for anything. They belong to the space. As the traveler continued, a subtle understanding formed, not fully articulated, but present nonetheless. This was not a town waiting to be revived. It did not need saving. It was not frozen in decline or suspended in abandonment. It was simply complete. And completeness, he realized, could feel unsettling when he encountered unexpectedly. Most places were defined by motion, by growth or decay, by ambition or loss. They told stories through what they were becoming or what they had been. This town did neither. It had arrived. The traveler felt not urged to leave, not because he was compelled to stay, but because there was nothing pressing him onward. The road had carried him here, and here seemed sufficient. He wondered briefly what the town looked like during the day. The thought did not demand an answer. Lights glowed steadily around him, neither dimming nor brightening. The night held its shape, as though content to remain as it was. He reached the end of the street and turned back toward the center, retracting his steps without feeling repetitive. The town did not change when approached from another direction. It offered the same calm order, the same readiness. As he walked, one idea surfaced gently, without urgency. Everything here was prepared. Doors, lights, roads, rooms, prepared for use, but not currently being used. It was the kind of preparation meant for arrival, and yet, standing in the middle of it all, the traveler could not shake the sense that whoever this place had been prepared for had already come, or perhaps was still expected. The thought lingered, weightless and unresolved, as the town continued to rest around him, complete, quiet, and waiting without impatience. The traveler did not plan the first conversation. It happened the way most ordinary exchanges do, without preparation, without importance attached to it. He was walking back toward the center of the town when he noticed someone standing near a storefront, adjusting a small sign in the window. The movement was careful, practiced. Nothing about it suggested urgency. He slowed, then stopped a short distance away. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The person turned, offering a polite expression that rested somewhere between recognition and neutrality. A small note followed, not an invitation, not a dismissal, just acknowledgement. "Good evening," the traveler said. The words sounded louder than he expected, as though the town carried voices differently. "Good evening," the person replied, tone even and hurried. There was a pause, not an uncomfortable one. The silence seemed to belong there, filling the space naturally rather than needing to be resolved. The traveler gestured gently toward the street behind him. "I didn't expect to come through here," he said, keeping his voice light. "It's a quiet place." The person smiled faintly. "Yes," they said, "it usually is." The answer was simple, complete. It did not extend itself further. They stood together for another moment, the storefront window reflecting both of them faintly, their cheeks softened by the glass. After a while, the traveler spoke again. "I must have missed the sign when I came," he said. "What town is this?" The person tilted their head slightly, as though considering the question. "It's just here," they said. Not evasive, not defensive. Simply stated. The traveler waited, expecting elaboration. None came. "I mean the same," he clarified gently. "I don't remember seeing it." The person's expression did not change. "Oh," they said. "The name?" They paused. The pause lasted a moment longer than expected, but not long enough to feel deliberate. "Yes," they continued. "It has one." The traveler smiled politely, mirroring the calm. "I'm sure it does." Another pause followed. "It doesn't come up very often," the person said at last. The explanation felt rehearsed, not memorized exactly, but familiar in a way that suggested it had been said before, perhaps many times. "I see," the traveler replied. There was no pressure in his tone. He did not insist. The conversation drifted into stillness again, the kind that did not require closure. After a few seconds, the person returned to adjusting the sign, aligning its edges with the precise care. The action seemed to conclude the change without formally ending it. The traveler continued walking. A short distance away, he encountered another resident seated on a bench near the small park. They sat upright, hands resting comfortably, gaze directed not at anything specific but toward the space ahead. He approached slowly, allowing his presence to be noticed without interruption. "Mind if I sit for a moment?" he asked. The person looked at the bench, then back at him. "There's room," they say. He sat. For a time, neither spoke. The fountain nearby moved quietly, its sound measured and consistent. Eventually, the traveler spoke again. "I've been walking around," he said. "It's a well-kept town." "Yes," the person said. "People take care of things." The phrase landed with a gentle certainty. "And you live here long?" the traveler asked, keeping his voice casual. The person considered the question. "Long enough," they said. The answer arrived smoothly, without hesitation. The traveler nodded. "Did you grow up here?" Another pause. "Not exactly," the person replied. They adjusted their posture slightly, then added, "But I've been here for some time now." The words felt arranged rather than remembered. The traveler sensed it, though he could not have explained how. There was no strain in the voice, no uncertainty, just a lack of specificity that seemed shared practice. Do many people pass through? He asked. Some do, the person said. Not everyone stays. The traveler glanced around the park. And those who stay? He asked. They find it suits them, the person replied. No further explanation followed. The fountain continued its quiet cycle. The lights overhead remained steady. After a moment, the traveler thanked them and stood, leaving the conversation where it rested. There was no sense of unfinished business, no expectation of follow-up. As he walked on, he noticed how similar the exchanges had been. Polite, measured, complete without being informative. He spoke with others as the evening progressed. A woman closing the door of a small shop. A man walking a dog at an hurried pace. Two people standing outside a building, engaged in a conversation that paused naturally when he approached. Each interaction followed a familiar rhythm. Greetings were returned warmly. Questions were acknowledged. Answers were offered carefully. No one was rude. No one refused to speak. And yet, certain details never surfaced. No one mentioned how long the town had existed. No one referenced even outside its boundaries. No one spoke of coming from elsewhere in a way that felt grounded. When he asked how long someone had lived there, the responses barely on slightly. A while, for some time, long enough to feel settled. When he asked where they had come from before, the answer softened. Not far, somewhere else, before here. Each phrase sounded sufficient on its own, yet none anchored itself to a place or time. It occurred to the traveler that no one had used the town's name in conversation unless prompted, and even then it never lingered. When spoken, it slipped past attention, like a word in a language half known. He tried repeating it silently to himself. It did not hold. The sound faded before it could attach meaning. As the night deepened, the town remained unchanged. Lights stayed on. Doors remained closed but welcoming. The few people he encountered moved with quiet purpose, as though guided by routines that required no explanation. What struck him most was the absence of correction. No one changed his presence. No one asked why he was there. No one inquired about his plans. It was as if arrival required no justification. At one point, he found himself standing beside a notice board near the center of town. Papers were pinned neatly in rows. Announcements were posted in tidy handwriting. Events without dates, reminders without deadlines, information without urgency. He read them slowly. They describe activities that felt ongoing rather than scheduled: maintenance, gatherings, shared responsibilities. Nothing indicated beginnings or endings. As he stepped away, another resident passed by. "Do you ever have visitors?" he asked, almost absent-mindedly. The person smiled politely. "From time to time," they said. "And do they live?" the traveler asked. The smile remained. "Some do," the person replied. The traveler did not ask about the others. He sensed that the answer would arrive already shaped. By the time he returned to his car, the town felt familiar without becoming known. The conversation had not revealed facts, but they had established something else: consistency. Every response, every pause, every careful phrasing aligned with the same quiet understanding. These were not people withholding information. They simply spoke from a place where certain details did not require articulation, or perhaps did not exist in the way he expected. As he rested against the car door, looking down the quiet street, a realization settled gently. The people here were not hiding the town from him. They were living in it in a way that did not depend on explanation. Their words carried the shape of memory, but not its weight, as though the sentences had been learned, repeated, passed along, not to deceive, but to maintain the calm order of things. The traveler felt unease, only growing awareness that in this town knowing was less important than belonging. And belonging, it seemed, and belonging, it seemed, did not require remembering how one arrived. The idea did not arrive suddenly. It formed slowly, settling into the traveler's thoughts. They weighed certain questions when the mind has grown quiet enough to notice them. He realized he did not know where he was. Not in the abstract sense. He knew the street beneath his feet, the buildings around him, the soft glow of light that defined the town's shape, but in the practical way that usually felt automatic. He did not know the town's position in relation to anything else. The realization was not alarming. It was simply incomplete. He returned to his car, opened the door, and sat inside without starting the engine. Interior light came up briefly, illuminating the familiar arrangement of the dashboard. For a moment, the town outside seemed framed, contained by the windshield. He reached into the glove compartment and took out a folded road map. The paper made a quiet sound as it opened, the creases resting slightly before relaxing into place. The map was worn at the edges, marked by use. Highways were clearly defined, towns labeled with careful precision. He spread it across the steering wheel and began to trace his route backward. The highway was there. The major intersection was there. The smaller roads branched off in recognizable patterns, thinning as they moved away from the main routes. He followed the path with his finger until he reached the point where he remembered turning off. The road he had taken did not appear. He looked again, slower this time. There were secondary roads, rural connectors, unnamed stretches of pavement, but none aligned with what he remembered. The curve was wrong. The spacing between junctions did not match. He folded the map slightly differently, scanning another section. Still nothing. The town itself was nowhere to be found. He felt no frustration. The absence did not resist him. It simply existed. He put the map aside and reached for his phone. The screen lit up softly, adjusting to the low light. Signal bars appeared, steady enough. He opened a mapping application and waited for it to orient itself. A small blue dot pulsed, indicating his position. The surrounding area loaded slowly, resolving into familiar colors and shapes. Roads appeared, labels populated the screen. But the blue dot hovered in a space that did not correspond to anything. It sat between named areas, unclaimed by boundaries. The dot remained isolated, floating over an unmarked region. The streets around him, clearly visible through the windshield, were not represented on the screen. He zoomed out. The dot shifted slightly, then settled again, still detached. The application suggested nearby towns. Names appeared at a distance that did not feel accurate. The directions offered routes that did not resemble the roads he had traveled. He closed the app and opened another. The result was the same. Different interface, different design, the same absence. He turned the phone sideways, then upright again, refreshed the screen, checked settings. Everything functioned as it should, except for the place he was standing in. The town did not register. He stepped out of the car and looked down the street, as though expecting the building themselves to respond. They remained unchanged. Lights glowed, windows reflected softly. The town held its shape without acknowledging the inquiry. He walked toward a nearby intersection where several street signs met. They were clearly marked, clean, legible. He copied the names into his phone exactly as writing. The search returns nothing. No listings, no references, no partial matches. He tried variations, abbreviations, full phrases. Still nothing. The string names existed only on the metal signs themselves. He stood there for a while, listening to the faint electrical hum of streetlights. The silence did not deepen. It remained consistent, supportive. It occurred to him, then, that the town was not resisting being found. It simply was not present in the places he was looking. He returned to the park and sat on a bench, the phone resting loosely in his hand. The fountain continued its steady movement, indifferent to the question unfolding nearby. He searched for a landmark instead: the cafe, the small grocery store, the park. None appeared. Even generic terms produce results that belong elsewhere: other towns, other places, similar shapes, similar names, but never this one. He felt a faint sense of curiosity deepened, not sharpened. The mystery did not ask to be solved quickly, it asked to be noticed. He tried something else. He opened the camera and took a photograph of the street in front of him. The image appeared crisp on the screen, lights and buildings captured exactly as they were. He examined it. Then he switched application unattended to upload the image for location data. The phone hesitated. The image existed, but its context did not. No coordinate attached, no location recognized. It was a picture without a place. The traveler leaned back on the bench, letting the phone rest beside him. Around him, the town continued its quiet routines. A person passed by in a hurried pace. Somewhere a door opened, then closed again. The sound contained and brief. Everything here was functioning. Only its position in the wider world seemed absent. He thought of the conversation he had earlier, how no one had spoken of where the town sat in relation to anything else, how direction had never extended beyond its edges. He wondered if anyone here even needed a map. The thought did not feel urgent. He stood and walked again, testing the boundaries of the town with intention this time. He followed a road that appeared to lead outward, its pavement narrowing slightly as it moved away from the center. Streetlights became fewer, but they did not end abruptly. The road curved, then straightened, then curved again. The scenario repeated gently. Trees similar to those he had already passed, houses set back at familiar distances. After some time, he realized he could not tell whether he was farther from the center than before. The town did not announce its limits. He stopped and turned around. The view behind him looked much like the view ahead. There was no clear threshold, no marker of transition. He walked back the way he had come, not because he felt lost, but because the concept of living had grown back. When he returned to the central streets, they welcomed him without comment. Nothing changed. Back at his car, he sat again, the interior now dark, the dashboard unlit. He did not start the engine. Instead, he closed his eyes for a moment. The question returned, front now with greater clarity. How could a place so complete leave no trace? It was not a small town struggling to survive, not a forgotten settlement eroded by time. This town was intact, maintained, occupied, prepared. And yet, it did not exist beyond itself. He opened his eyes and looked at the buildings once more. They did not flicker. They did not fade. They remained fully present. It occurred to him then that perhaps the town did not need to be found. Perhaps it did not belong to systems designed for places that connected outward. Map assumed continuity. Records assumed reference. This town seemed to require neither. It existed its own completeness, self-contained and sufficient. As long as one was inside it, the town was real. Perhaps that was enough. The traveler felt not urgency to resolve the contradiction. The thought settled into him gently, like a puzzle set aside rather than completed. He leaned back, letting the quiet return to the foreground. The town did not explain itself. It did not need to. And as the lights continued to glow and the street held their careful order, the question remained, not as a demand, but as a companion. How could a place so complete leave no trace? The town offered no answer. It simply remained. But the time the traveler began asking about the town's past, the question no longer felt like curiosity. It felt like orientation, not because he needed answers urgently, but because history usually provided context, a sense of direction, a movement from then to now. Here, that movement was difficult to sense. He entered a small public building near the center of town. Its doors was unlocked, opening with a smooth, familiar resistance. Inside, the air carried the same balance, a stillness he had noticed elsewhere. Neither warm nor cold, neither old nor new. The space reassembled a modest local archive. Shelves lined the walls, holding folders, books, and neatly labeled boxes. A desk sat near the center, its surface clear except for the lamp and a small stack of paper arranged lightly. Some stood behind the desk, reading. They looked up as he entered. A polite nod followed. "Is this public?" the traveler asked. "Yes," they said. "You're welcome to look around." The invitation did not sound conditional. He thanked them and began to browse the shelf slowly. Letting his eye move across spines and labels. The organization was careful, consistent. Categories were clear. Local records, community notes, maintenance logs, photograph. He reached for a thin book marked Town History. It opened easily, pages soft but intact. The first section described the town's early formation, a settlement established for practical reasons, a location chosen for balance rather than opportunity. Dates were included. They seemed reasonable. The language was calm, factual, without embellishment. He turned the page. The next section covered growth, slow, deliberate, measured. Buildings added, infrastructure complete, community roles established. Everything progressed locally. Then, gradually, the tone shifted, not abruptly, not noticeable at first. Dates became less frequent. Events were described without urgency. Maintenance replaced expansion. Continuity replaced change. He slipped ahead. The descriptions continued. But time seemed to lose its forward pull. Years passed without distinction. Decades were summarized in a few steady lines. Nothing significant happens, not because nothing occurred, but because nothing altered the shape of the town. He searched for a recent entry. The last pages described conditions that matched what he had already seen: the same buildings, the same streets, the same routines. The dates, however, were unclear, not missing, just imprecise. He closed the book and returned it to the shelf. Nearby, a collection of photographs caught his attention. They were mounted carefully, each labeled in neat handwriting: street views, community gatherings, portraits of residents standing in familiar places. He examined them closely. The clothing varied slightly, suggesting different eras, yet the setting remained unchanged. The same buildings, the same park, the same arrangement of streets. In several photographs, he recognized people he had spoken with earlier. They appeared younger in some images, older in others, but not by much. The changes were subtle, almost optional. He checked the dates written beneath the photograph. They were spaced years apart, sometimes decades. The differences between them did not match the passage of the time. He stepped back, letting the collection blur slightly as he took it in as a whole. The town's history did not advance. It extended, gently, without progressing. He returned to the desk. "These records," he said carefully, "they are very well kept." "Yes," the person replied. "We try to keep these things consistent." "How often are they updated?" he asked. The person considered the question. "As needed," they said. "And when is that?" the traveler asked. "When something changes," they replied. The answer was complete. He did not press further. Outside, the town continued its quiet rhythm. He walked again, this time with attention turned to signs of age, cracks, repairs, layers of renovation. They were present, but evenly distributed. Nothing appeared neglected. Nothing appeared recently altered. The town existed in a state of maintenance rather than development. He stood beside a building that looked older than the rest. Its stonework, softened by time, a plaque was mounted near the entrance. He leaned in to read it. The text described the building's purpose when it was first constructed. The language was formal, respectful. There was no mention of closure, no reference to repurposing. The building was still serving its original function. He stepped back. Across the street, a newer structure stood, clean lines, modern materials. It too appeared settled, not new, not provisional. Both buildings coexist without tension. Time had not replaced one with the other. It had simply layered them. Later, he spoke again with a resident he had met earlier. "Do you remember when you first came here?" he asked gently. The person smiled. "I remember arriving," they said. "And before that?" he asked. The smile softened, but did not fade. "Before that," they said, "things were different." "In what way?" the traveler asked. "Less settled," they replied. The answer did not invite elaboration. He nodded. "And since you arrived?" he asked. The person looked around the street doubtfully. "Since then," they said, "things have been much the same." The phrase landed with a practiced ease. As he continued walking, the pattern became clearer. The town had a past. It simply did not emphasize it. History here was not a narrative of progress or decline. It was a record of arrival and continuation. People arrived. They stayed. The town adjusted just enough to include them. Nothing moved forward. Nothing needed to. He thought of the record again. How they describe change only when absolutely necessary. How time flowed without urgency. The town did not measure itself against outside the world. It did not need to prove relevance. It existed fully in the present it had chosen to maintain. As night deepened, the lights remained steady, indifferent to the hour. The town did not sign up transitions. There was no closing time for history here, only preservation. The traveler stood once more in the center of town, the quiet surrounding him evenly. He felt the question settle again, calm and persistent. If the past did not lead forward, if the present did not aim toward the future, then what, exactly, the time to hear? The town did not answer. It continued to exist, complete, maintained, and unhurried, its history stretching gently behind it, never quite arriving anywhere new. The decision to walk toward the edge of the town came without urgency. It was not an attempt to escape, nor a need to test boundaries. It simply felt like the next quiet thing to do. The traveler chose a road that seemed to lead outward, its pavement slightly narrower than the streets near the center. Houses became more spaced apart as he moved forward, set back behind low fences or small stretches of lawn. Streetlights followed at a measured intervals. They did not end abruptly. They did not hint out of too quickly. They remained present, as though the town did not feel the need to mark where it stopped. As he walked, the sound of his footsteps blended easily with the environment. Gravel appeared briefly along the edge of the road, then gave away again to the smooth pavement. There were no signs pointing toward elsewhere, no arrows, no distance listed, no instructions for leaving. The absence felt deliberate, but not restrictive. The road curved gently to the left, then straightened again. Trees lined one side, evenly spaced, their branches trimmed back with care. On the other side, a row of houses continued, each one familiar in scale and design. He passed a mailbox that looked identical to the one he had seen closer to the center. Then another. He slowed slightly, not because he felt uncertain, but because the repetition invited attention. The houses were not the same. They differed in small, reasonable ways: window placement, roof line, porch shape, according to the preference rather than pattern. And yet, the rhythm of spacing remained unchanged. The traveler walked for some time, his sense of distance growing indistinct. There were no markers to measure progress against, no shift in terrain to suggest movement away from something known. The road remained consistent beneath his feet. Eventually, he reached a point where the houses thinned further, giving way to open land. The pavement narrowed again, its edges less defined, but still maintained. Grass grew taller here, though not wide. The ground remained level. He paused and looked back. The town behind him looked much as it had before. Lights slowed steadily. Streets held their shape. Nothing about the view suggested he had moved far. He turned forward again and continued. The road bent slightly, enough to obscure what lay ahead. Trees gathered more closely on either side, their presence of rather than enclosing. The traveler noticed that the air felt unchanged, no cooler, no heavier. The same balanced stillness followed him. After some time, he came upon a small intersection. Two roads met, each equally unmarked. There were no signs indicated they led, no suggestion that one was more significant than the other. He closed without thinking. The walk continued. The scenery shifted softly. The trees were arranged differently now, their spacing altered just enough to suggest variation. The houses, when they appeared again, were set back at familiar distances, their forms echoing what he had already seen. He passed a fence that looked recently repaired. A gate stood close but unlocked. A bench rested beneath a tree, its surface worn smooth. The details were new, the arrangement was not. The traveler became aware of a quiet pattern forming. He walked, and the town adjusted, not by changing, but by offering familiar elements in a slightly altered order. Time passed gently. Minutes felt like minutes. And yet, the sense of covering ground remained elusive. He stopped again and looked around. There was no clear indication of direction, no sense of having crossed a threshold. He tried to remember the point at which the town might reasonably end. The thought did not resolve. The town did not present an edge in the way he expected. He continued walking until the road began to resemble one he recognized. The curve, the placement of trees, the angle of a fence in the distance. He slowed. This was a street he had already walked. Not identical, but close enough to feel familiar. He turned back again, retracting his steps. The repetition did not feel like a loop. It felt like a gentle redirection. The town was not closing in. It was rearranging. As he walked back toward the center, the street welcomed him without comment. No sign suggested he had been gone long. No indication that he had reached a limit. He noticed then that there were still no exit signs, no markers of departure. The concept of living existed, but it was not emphasized. Standing at an intersection, the traveler felt a realization settle quietly. Walking here did not function the way it did elsewhere. Movement did not guarantee distance. Progress did not imply change. The town did not resist exploration. It simply absorbed. He returned slowly, unhurried, allowing the trees to pass by in the familiar calm. The lights continued to glow. The houses remained attentive but silent. The town did not reveal where it ended. It did not need to. It existed as long as one walked within it. And as he moved through the quiet streets once more, the traveler understood that here walking did not always mean going somewhere new. Sometimes it simply meant remaining. The question did not arrive suddenly. It formed slowly, like condensation on glass. Why would someone stay in a place like this? The traveler did not ask it aloud. There was no urgency in needing an answer. Still, as he walked once more through the town, the thought followed him gently, appearing in the spaces between observations. He noticed the people again, not many at once. One person sweeping a small front step, another adjusting a curtain from inside a lit room. Someone seated on a bench, hands folded, posture relaxed. They did not look trapped. They did not appear to be waiting. If anything, they seemed settled, anchored to the present moment with a calm that did not require explanation. The traveler slowed as he passed them. No one stopped him. No one called out. But there was a shared understanding in the air, subtle and spoken. This was not a place people rushed through. He sat on a low wall near a small square where a fountain murmured softly. The water moved in a steady pattern, repeating without becoming monotonous. A person sat nearby, not close enough to feel intrusive, not far enough to feel distant. They looked ahead, watching the water. After a while, the traveler spoke, not with a direct question, but with an observation. It feels like the time moves differently here. The person nodded slightly, yet they said, without emphasis. There was no elaboration. Silence returned, comfortable and unbroken. After a moment, the traveler continued. Do people ever leave? The person considered this. Some do, they replied. The answer did not carry judgment. It did not imply loss, just acknowledgment. And the others? The traveler asked. The person shifted slightly, as though adjusting to familiar thought. The others realized they already have. The words were spoken gently, not as a riddle, not as a warning, as a description. The traveler let the meaning rest where it landed. He noticed then that many of the people he had seen early shared a similar quality, not sameness, but steadiness. They moved without haste. Their expressions were neutral, but not empty. They seemed present, not anchored to the past or future, just here. Later, as he walked through a quiet residential street, he passed a house with its door open. Inside, a table was set, though no one sat there. Plates arranged neatly, a light turned on, a chair slightly pulled back. Everything suggested readiness, not for an event, not for continuity. He paused at the doorway, then moved on. Further along, they encountered someone tending a small garden. The plants were healthy, well cared for, though modest in scale. Is this your home? The traveler asked. Yes, they replied. How long have you lived here? They smiled faintly, not at a question, but at the familiarity of it. Long enough, they said. Again, the phrase appeared, not defensive, not evasive, simply sufficient. The traveler understood then that the town did not measure time in years or dates. It measured in adaptation, in the quiet acceptance of repetition, in the days that did not demand distinction. People stayed because staying did not feel like postponement. There was nothing pressing beyond the moment. No sense of failing behind. No urgency becomes something else. The town did not promise fulfillment. It offered consistency. As evening deepened, lights appeared in more windows. The street grew softer, shadows stretching without becoming heavy. The traveler realized that the town did not ask for commitment. No one invited him to stay. No one warned him away. It existed, open and complete, allowing each person to decide what it was to them. Those who stayed did not seem to have failed to live. They had simply stopped needing to. The thought settled gently. He felt no pull to abandon the place immediately, no pressure to remain, just a sense of understanding. Staying here did not mean giving something up. It meant allowing the outside world to become less insistent. As he walked back toward the center of town once more, the traveler felt the calm deepen, not into sleep, but into something adjacent, a mental stillness, space where thoughts slowed and softened. He realized that if he had stayed longer, the town would not change him. It would simply allow him to rest in who he already was. And perhaps that was why some people stayed, not because they were lost, but because, for once, nothing was asking them to move. The idea of living arrived quietly, not as a decision, but as a possibility. The traveler did not wake up on one morning with urgency in his chest. There was no internal signal telling him it was time. Instead, the thought appeared gently, the way a memory does when the room is quiet enough to hold it. He noticed it while standing near the edge of the central square. The fountain continued its steady rhythm. The lights glowed as they always had. The town felt complete. And because of that, the idea of departure felt optional. He walked once more through the street he now recognized, not by name. There were still no names, but by presence. Each turn felt familiar, even if he could not say when he had first taken it. Nothing asked him to hurry, nothing tried to keep him. That was the strange part. If the town had insisted, he might have resisted. If it had begged, he might have left, but it did neither. As he approached the road where he had first entered, he realized there was no clear marker of arrival or exit. The pavement did not change. The trees remained evenly spaced. The light held its calm balance. He stopped, looked around. The town behind him looked the same as ever. Ahead, the road extended, quiet, unmarked, unremarkable. There was no sense of crossing a line. He took a few steps forward, then paused. It occurred to him that living might not feel different from staying. The thought did not frighten him. It felt neutral. He continued walking. The road stretched on, gentle and patient. The scenery shifted slightly, then settled again into patterns he had already seen. A fence, a vent, a tree placed just so. He did not feel lost, nor he did feel directed. After some time, how much, he could not say, he noticed that the town was no longer visible behind him, not because it had vanished, but because he had stopped checking. The realization settled softly. Living, he understood, was not an action the town recognized. It did not record departures. It did not hold onto footprints. One could walk away, and the town would remain complete, as if no one had ever passed through. He wondered, briefly if he was still within its boundaries. The question did not demand an answer. As the road continued, the traveler felt the familiar quiet deepen. The same calm he had felt in the streets now accompanied with him there. Nothing changed abruptly, nothing resolved. It was possible, he considered, that he had already left. It all was possible that he had not. The distinction mattered less than he had expected. He slowed his pace. His breathing matched the rhythm of his steps. The world felt evenly weighted. He thought of the people he had met, their gentle answers, their unhurried presence. They had not stayed because they could not live. They had stayed because living was no longer necessary. The traveler smiled faintly at the thought. He realized that even if he returned to somewhere familiar, somewhere with names and maps and measurable distance, this town would not disappear. It would simply stop being visible, existing quietly, somewhere outside the need to be located. He reached a point where the road faded into something less defined, not an ending, just a soft transition. Grass grew closer to the pavement. The air remained unchanged. He stopped again, not to decide, just to stand. In that moment, it became clear that the town did not require memory to persist. One did not have to remember it clearly. One did not have to describe it accurately. It was enough to have passed through. It was enough to have passed through. Enough to have felt its stillness. Enough to know that such a place could exist. The traveler turned slightly, not back, not forward, just enough to shift his balance. And as he did, the sense of movement softened into rest. Whether he continued walking, or whether he remained where he was, mattered less with each passing second. The town did not follow him. It did not call out. It did not fade dramatically. It simply allowed the quiet to continue. And in that quiet, the traveler understood the final truth of the place. You did not leave the town. You simply stopped needing to know where you were. The road remained. The calm remained. And somewhere, just beyond attention, just beyond thought, the town existed exactly as it always had, complete, unmarked, waiting for no one.